James Baldwin's Going to Meet the Man focuses on the character of Jesse, a white deputy sheriff living in the Deep South. Jesse is a sort of literary everyman. He's had a few jobs, finally settled with the police department a few years back. He's married, all he seems to want is some peace and quiet and the occasional roll in the hay with his wife. But Jesse has a deep, dark secret. He's a horrible racist. Except it's not really a secret at all. Jesse's hang-ups about race are a core part of who he is, and who just about all the white characters in this story are. Their racism isn't a secret. It's a badge of honor that binds them together as who they are. White people. Jesse's frustration with who he is takes several forms, from not being able to get an erection to have sex with his wife, to not being able to connect to his fellow white supremacists. The bond of accepted and encouraged racism having been stripped away from him. Jesse thinks he's a good man, just like his father thought he was a good man, just like all the white people picnicking at the lynching thought they were good people as they cut a black man's penis off and then burned him alive. You see, the deepest seated element of their racism is that a bad deed done to a black person isn't a bad deed at all. You can only sin against a person, and to them, the color of your skin decided how much of a person you really were. Baldwin's story is told through a series of interactions and flashbacks and focuses on ideas of humanity and masculinity. Jesse's masculinity is in part based on his ability to have sex with his wife. His inability to perform strips away some of his manhood, creating a psychological issue that cycles throughout the entire story. The beating of the young black activist in prison literally gives Jesse an erection, establishing the connection between power, violence, and masculinity in Jesse's mind. Jesse misses the good old days when he and his white neighbors could oppress, suppress, and abuse their black neighbors without any fear of retribution by the black community or interference from northern outsiders. The bond these men shared was through their violent supremacy. They were nobodies who had achieved nothing in their lives, but they could connect and feel manly by exerting power over their black neighbors. The world has begun to change, and they can't manage to change with it. Black men are in the army now. The rights of black people to vote and live in whatever community they want are being protected. The government, which only very recently seemed to exist strictly to protect and reinforce white supremacy, has now left these southern white men feeling betrayed and abandoned. They see the writing on the wall. Things are changing. This is a war they have to fight on their own, but one in which they don't truly trust each other. Jesse's inability to have sex with his wife is juxtaposed with the thrill he gets from essentially raping black girls. Jesse's wife is white, and therefore must be treated in a certain way. The black girls aren't fully people to Jesse, so he can behave in the lewdest and most horrible way with them, and that excites him. His encounter with the young black activist in jail sets him off on a series of memories that ends with his grisly recollection of a lynching celebrated by both of his parents and hundreds of fellow white citizens. We find out that prior to this moment, Jesse was close friends with a young black boy named Otis. When young white Jesse didn't understand the way race caused things to work in the South, he would ask Otis to explain it to him. Despite also being a small boy, Otis would have to be much more aware of the dangers posed to him by the color of his skin. On the day of the lynching, Otis isn't there though, so Jesse's father becomes his guide and mentor through this racial interaction. Jesse wasn't born racist, he was taught to be that way. The young black man being lynched is guilty of nothing more than bumping into a white woman. And Jesse can't understand why Otis, who had nothing to do with it, who never does anything to anyone, has to be afraid of such a thing. And Jesse's father tells him they do things like this to guarantee that Otis never does do anything wrong. The lynching is a reminder to all young black boys that white people still have the power. Jesse can't rally the whole community to lynch a black man for no reason anymore. There are too many outsiders watching. The black community has grown more unified. Even if Jesse is still free to be a horrible, violent racist, as evidenced by his abuse of the young activist, he has less power than he used to. His racism is such an important part of his personality, an important part of who he is, that his racism is more important than his whiteness. And the power that he feels like he has lost as the world changes has made him less of a man. At the end of the story, and only through focusing on the violence he has witnessed and carried out himself, Jesse is able to have sex with his wife, but not as a white man, but by pretending to be a black man. In Jesse's mind, the power he has lost must have gone somewhere. And despite his attempts to grasp at it and keep whatever is left of it, connecting to the all-haunting idea of a black man with power is the only thing that lets Jesse finally have sex with his wife.